The Zarkon battle cruiser Merciless Judgment hung in the void like a predatory blade, its obsidian hull absorbing and deflecting stellar radiation with calculated efficiency. Captain Rickstall's six-fingered hands moved across the holographic control interface, each gesture precise and weighted with centuries of galactic conquest. "Preliminary scan complete," announced Sen Lieutenant Vora, her translucent skin shifting through shades of blue-gray, a physiological tell of professional anxiety. Target planet: Earth. Classification: Emerging technological civilization. Threat level: minimal. Rickstall's membranous eyelids flickered, the closest approximation to a human eye roll in his species' repertoire. Another routine planetary assessment. Another potential client species to be cataloged, controlled, or consumed. The Galactic Confederation had long ago perfected the art of cultural integration, which was a polite euphemism for systematic subjugation. But something was different about this planetary scan. The holographic display began to glitch, not with the typical electromagnetic interference, but with something more deliberate. Quantum-level anomalies danced across the projection, creating patterns that defied standard computational models. Sen Lieutenant Vora's skin turned a stark, pale white, the color of pure terror in her species. "Sir," she whispered, "the scan, it's changing." Rickstall leaned forward. The initial planetary overview had been standard. One medium-sized terrestrial planet, third from its solar system's primary star. Technological development consistent with early-stage industrial civilization. Multiple political divisions, moderate environmental challenges, nothing remarkable. But now, the data streams told a different story. Energy signatures clustered in unexpected locations, not military installations, not power generation centers, something else entirely. A research facility in the Arctic showed a quantum entanglement signature that shouldn't exist with current human technology. A suburban neighborhood in North America demonstrated a communication network complexity that rivaled the Confederation's most advanced tactical systems. And then there were the biological readings. Multiple non-sentient species were registering impossible data points. Canine companions showing neural plasticity that suggested near-sapient problem-solving capabilities. Marine mammals displaying communication patterns more complex than some recognized intelligent species. Avian populations with computational tracking abilities that made the ship's own sensors look primitive. "Run a tertiary diagnostic," Rickstall commanded, his voice a low resonant growl that vibrated the ship's molecular tension hull. Vora's fingers danced across the interface. Each successive scan revealed more impossible data. These weren't just animals. They were something else. Something the Confederation had never encountered. A sudden proximity alarm shattered the analytical silence. Something had locked onto their ship, not with weapons, but with a tracking signature so precise, so elegant, that it shouldn't exist. "Sir," Vora's voice cracked, "we're being observed." The first rule of galactic exploration: never assume superiority. The second rule: be prepared for anything. The Zarkon battle cruiser Merciless Judgment, veteran of 100 conquests, suddenly felt very small in the vast darkness of space, and for the first time in generations, its crew felt something they had almost forgotten: uncertainty. The landing zone was unremarkable by any galactic standard. Maple Grove Estates, a suburban neighborhood that looked like it had been carved from a marketing executive's most bland imagination. Identical houses with identical lawns. Minivans. Mailboxes. The kind of place the Confederation's invasion protocols classified as low-resistance residential zone. Strike Team Alpha didn't expect resistance. They never did. Sergeant Krulnax adjusted the quantum-dampening field on his exo-armor, the metallic surface shifting like liquid mercury. 5 members of the elite infiltration unit moved with practiced synchronicity, quantum absorption shields, neural link combat interfaces, micro-singularity weaponry that could dissolve matter at the atomic level. They were hunting something, or so they thought. The target was a nondescript 2-story house with beige siding and a basketball hoop mounted above the garage. Thermal scans showed minimal human occupancy, an elderly individual, possibly a human female, and a heat signature consistent with a medium-sized domesticated canine. Standard pacification protocol. Krellnax subvocalize through the neural link. Minimal force. Genetic sampling. Quick extraction. They breached the perimeter with surgical precision. Quantum fields nullified electronic security systems. Molecular disruptors rendered physical locks meaningless. The team moved like liquid shadow, each member covering a specific tactical angle. They didn't see the dog. Max was a rescue. Part shepherd, part who knows what. Adopted 3 years ago by Margaret Wilson, a retired veterinary nurse with a lifetime of understanding how living systems work. He wasn't a special breed, wasn't trained by military professionals. Just a dog who had learned, watched, and understood more than anyone could imagine. The first alien scout through the back door never saw him coming. In less than 3 seconds, the alien's neural link armor was compromised. Not destroyed. Strategically disabled. A precisely applied bite to a critical joint mechanism. A calculated impact that scrambled quantum communication interfaces. The alien went down not with an explosion, but with a precise, mechanical failure. The second scout tried to raise an alarm. Max was already moving. It wasn't aggression. It was calculation. Years of living with Margaret, of watching, of learning. The dog moved with a precision that would make special forces look like amateur dancers. Joint locks, pressure points, quantum field disruption that seemed impossible. By the time the third scout realized something was wrong, 2 of his team were neutralized. Not killed. Disabled. Strategically immobilized with a surgical precision that defied every known combat protocol. Margaret Wilson watched from her kitchen window, a cup of chamomile tea in her hand. "Good boy," she whispered. Max returned to the backyard, sat next to a well-worn tennis ball, waited. The Galactic Confederation's first physical contact with Earth would be recorded in classified archives, not as a moment of violent conflict, but as the day they learned that domesticated didn't mean weak, that companion didn't mean inferior. The day they met Max. The basketball hoop cast a long shadow. A single tennis ball lay forgotten on carefully mowed grass. The only evidence that anything extraordinary had happened was the smoking remains of advanced alien technology, carefully disabled by a dog nobody would have considered a threat. Dr. Aria Chen stood before the holographic display, her fingers tracing quantum entanglement patterns that defied conventional understanding. The Interspecies Communication Research Center was not a military facility, not officially, but everyone who mattered knew it was something far more important. "Look," she said to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, "it's not about individual capability. It's about the network." The display erupted with a 3-dimensional representation of something unprecedented. Biological communication pathways that stretched across multiple species, multiple environments, with a complexity that made the Galactic Confederation's most advanced communication systems look like children's tin can telephones. A dolphin off the coast of Hawaii synchronized navigation data with a search and rescue dog in Colorado. A therapy horse in Montana transmitted psychological stabilization algorithms to a research team in Antarctica. A flock of ravens in New Zealand processed computational problems that would take most AI systems weeks to complete. This was not cooperation. This was something else entirely. In the Confederation's archives, such a system would be classified as a collective intelligence, but that term fell desperately short of what was actually happening on Earth. "It's adaptive symbiosis," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to Aria. "They're not just communicating. They're evolving together." The latest data from the alien incursion provided the final piece of evidence. The disabled alien scout's technology had been systematically dismantled, not by military precision, but by something far more organic. Max, the dog from the suburban neighborhood, had not just neutralized the threat. He had studied it, learned from it, adapted to it, Dr. Chen pulled up another layer of data. Service animals weren't just trained. They were active participants in complex problem-solving networks. A guide dog for a visually impaired researcher wasn't just a companion. It was a mobile quantum computing node. A search and rescue canine wasn't just tracking scents. It was collecting and processing environmental data in real time. The Confederation's initial assessment of Earth as a low-threat emerging civilization was looking more like the most spectacular miscalculation in galactic history. "We're not dealing with individual species," Aria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're dealing with a planetary immune system." Marcus nodded. The quantum display continued to pulse, showing interconnections that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Dolphins communicating with whales, dogs networking with research teams, birds collecting and sharing environmental data across continents. A sudden alert flashed across the display. Something was happening in the deep ocean. The pod of Orcs had just intercepted a deep-sea communication pulse from an unidentified source. Not an attack. Not a defense mechanism. A conversation. "They're talking," Marcus breathed. "And we're just now learning how to listen." The holographic display continued to pulse. Alive. Adaptive. A living network that didn't just communicate. It thought. It learned. It evolved. Earth was not just a planet. It was an organism. And humanity was just one of its many remarkable components. The demonstration began with silence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez wheeled herself to the center of the International Research Symposium, her service dog Atlas sitting perfectly still beside her. The alien observers from the Galactic Confederation sat in the front row, their sensory arrays primed to detect the slightest anomaly. They had no idea what was coming. Elena was a quantum neuroengineer who had lost the use of her legs in a research accident 5 years ago. But lost was the wrong word. She had transformed, adapted, evolved. Atlas was more than a service dog. He was a living, breathing extension of her nervous system. With a subtle hand gesture, almost imperceptible, Elena activated the neural interface. Atlas moved, not with a command, not with training, but with a synchronicity that suggested something far more profound than human-animal cooperation. The holographic display erupted with a cascade of quantum computational algorithms, real-time problem-solving that made the Confederation's most advanced AI look like an abacus. Atlas wasn't just assisting Elena. He was computing, processing, adapting. "This," Elena said, her voice calm and clear, "is technological symbiosis." The demonstration continued. A series of increasingly complex tasks. Quantum computing problems, neurological interface challenges, adaptive problem-solving scenarios that required split-second decisions, and multi-layered computational thinking. Atlas didn't just help. He anticipated, calculated, transformed. In another part of the facility, a research team watched a different kind of symbiosis. Marine biologists had developed a communication interface with a pod of bottlenose dolphins. But interface was too clinical a term. This was a partnership. The dolphins were helping design more efficient underwater communication systems. Their natural echolocation capabilities, combined with human computational techniques, were revolutionizing everything from marine research to deep-sea exploration. A rescue team in the Andes Mountains provided another stunning example. A search and rescue team composed of humans and specially trained dogs navigated a complex mountain terrain. The dogs weren't just tracking. They were analyzing geological data, predicting potential avalanche zones, communicating environmental conditions in real time. The Galactic Confederation observers began to understand something terrifying. This wasn't technology applied to animals. This was a living, breathing, adaptive ecosystem. Elena's final demonstration pushed beyond anything the alien observers could comprehend. Atlas began to assist her in real-time neural prosthetic development. Not as a tool, not as an assistant, but as a collaborative partner. The neural interface between Elena and Atlas showed something unprecedented. a quantum-level communication that blurred the lines between biological and technological systems, between human and animal, between individual and collective intelligence. "We don't train our companions," Alina said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "We evolve with them." Atlas looked up, met the eyes of the alien observers, and in that moment they understood something fundamental. They were not looking at a human and her dog. They were looking at a single adaptive system, and it was looking back. The classified file landed on Admiral Krelax's desk with a quantum-encrypted thud that seemed to vibrate with forbidden knowledge. Top-secret genetic research reports from Earth. Not military files. Not government documents. Agricultural research reports. The first page made his respiratory membranes flutter in what could only be described as professional terror. Border collies that could predict and manage complex agricultural systems with an accuracy that made predictive AI look like children's guessing games. Not through brute force computation, but through an almost intuitive understanding of complex ecological systems. A single dog named Hermes had reduced crop failure rates in a Midwestern agricultural cooperative by 87.3%. Not through technological intervention, through observation, prediction, adaptation. The research detailed generations of selective breeding that went far beyond simple physical trait selection. These were living computational systems disguised as farm dogs. Dr. Sarah Chen's research notes were a quantum leap beyond traditional genetic engineering. "We're not just breeding for capability," one margin note read. "We're breeding for collaborative intelligence." Another section focused on therapy horses, not just animals trained to assist humans with psychological trauma. Living, breathing biofeedback systems that could detect and mitigate emotional distress at a neurological level. A case study described a therapy horse named Luna who had helped veterans with complex PTSD recover more effectively than 6 months of traditional psychological intervention. The horse didn't just respond to human emotional states. It actively participated in emotional regulation. The genetic modifications weren't just physical. They were psychological, emotional, something fundamentally beyond the Confederation's understanding of biological manipulation. Ravens presented another stunning example. Not just birds. Distributed computational networks that solved multi-step mechanical problems with a collective intelligence that defied traditional understanding. A research facility in Alaska had documented ravens solving complex mechanical puzzles, not through individual brilliance, but through collective problem-solving that suggested something closer to a living computer network than an animal population. "We're not modifying species," one researcher's note read. "We're creating collaborative intelligence platforms." The most terrifying document was a comprehensive overview of canine genetic research. Generations of careful breeding had created something that wasn't just a dog. It was a living, breathing adaptive system. Neural plasticity tests showed these animals could learn and adapt faster than most sapient species in the Galactic Confederation. They didn't just respond to training. They anticipated. They innovated. A border collie named Einstein had demonstrated the ability to learn and implement new herding strategies after watching a single demonstration. Not through simple mimicry, through genuine understanding and innovation. The final page of the report contained a single line that made Admiral Krelax's entire physiological system go still. Humanity's greatest technology is not what they build. It's what they grow. Outside the classified research facility, a border collie named Hermes sat watching a complex agricultural field. Not guarding, not herding. Thinking, adapting, evolving. The diplomatic mission descended into chaos the moment the first animal companions entered the room. It wasn't an invasion. It was a demonstration. A therapy llama named Serenity stood beside the human delegation, its presence creating a measurable reduction in ambient aggression. Confederation psychologists watched in bewildered terror as their most advanced threat assessment algorithms began to malfunction. Ambassador Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the same quantum neuroengineer from the previous demonstration, had carefully curated this moment. Her service dog Atlas sat at her side, but he was more than a companion. He was a living, breathing communication interface. The alien delegation consisted of 3 primary species from the Galactic Confederation. The Zarkon, tall, crystalline beings of pure computational logic. The Moltheri, empathic creatures who communicated through complex biochemical exchanges. The Renvei, energy-based life forms who processed information through quantum resonance. None of them were prepared for what happened next. Serenity, the llama, began to move. Not randomly. Not with typical animal behavior, but with a calculated precision that suggested something far more complex than simple training. The room's psychological temperature began to change, literally. Confederation observers had sophisticated emotional measurement technologies, quantum resonance scanners, biochemical interaction monitors, neurological state detectors. Every single one of them went haywire. The therapy llama wasn't just in the room. It was actively managing the emotional landscape, reducing tension, moderating potential conflict, creating a psychological environment conducive to communication. Atlas, Alina's service dog, began to interface with the diplomatic communication systems, not as a tool, not as an assistant, but as an active participant in the negotiation process. Moltheri empaths found their biochemical communication pathways subtly redirected, not blocked, not disrupted, guided. Zarkon computational beings discovered their logical matrices being gently nudged toward collaborative problem-solving. The Renvei energy beings experienced something unprecedented, a form of emotional calibration they had never encountered. "We're not here to fight," Alina said, her voice calm. "We're here to understand." Serenity took a step forward. The entire room's psychological dynamic shifted. The most advanced Confederation psychologists broke down. Their most sophisticated threat assessment algorithms could not process the complexity of what was happening. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about dominance. It was about collaboration. When a potential armed conflict emerged, the human team didn't reach for weapons. Their animal companions, each a living, thinking, adaptive system, created a defensive perimeter that made traditional military tactics look like children's games. A trained eagle provided real-time tactical assessment. A service dog managed communication interfaces. The therapy llama continued to regulate the room's emotional landscape. The Galactic Confederation realized they were facing something entirely new. Not a species, an ecosystem. And it was looking back at them with calm, calculated intelligence. The conflict erupted without warning, but not in the way anyone expected. It wasn't a battle of weapons. It was a battle of systems. The Galactic Confederation's assault fleet hung in orbit, their quantum-based weapons charged and ready. Massive battleships that had subjugated 1,000 worlds. Technological marvels of destruction that could reduce entire planetary surfaces to atomic dust. They didn't understand what they were about to face. The first wave of attack came from the oceans. A pod of Orcs, working in perfect synchronization with a network of underwater research drones, began to manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum. Not with weapons, with information, with communication. The Confederation's communication systems began to fragment, not through direct attack, but through an impossible level of adaptive interference. A research dolphin named Echo, part biological entity, part living computer, coordinated a communication assault that made traditional electronic warfare look like children's radio games. Quantum entanglement patterns shifted. Communication bandwidths were subtly manipulated. The battleship's weapon systems began to experience impossible glitches. On the ground, a different kind of defense emerged. Eagles provided real-time tactical data, not through simple reconnaissance, through a distributed computational network that analyzed and predicted battle scenarios faster than any AI. Each bird was a living sensor node, communicating across impossible distances. A trained border collie named Sentinel managed a complex defensive grid. Agricultural research had transformed these animals into something far beyond traditional working dogs. Sentinel wasn't just watching, wasn't just defending. Sentinel was strategizing. The alien fleet discovered something terrifying. Every attempt to target a specific location was met with an adaptive response. Dolphins jamming communication systems, eagles providing real-time tactical data, service dogs neutralizing ground-based threats with surgical precision. A trained whale, part of a deep-sea research program, assisted in creating a complex electromagnetic interference field that rendered alien weapon systems useless. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from a secure communication center. Her service dog Atlas wasn't just by her side. He was an active participant in the planetary defense network. "We're not fighting," she said to her team. "We're communicating." The Confederation's military strategists began to understand the true horror of their miscalculation. They weren't fighting a planet. They were fighting an entire adaptive ecosystem. Humans were just one component of a living, thinking, collaborative system. Satellite networks danced with impossible communication patterns. Research animals became living computational nodes. Domesticated companions transformed into a planetary immune system. A therapy horse in Montana detected and mitigated psychological warfare attempts. Ravens in Alaska solved complex computational challenges in real time. Service dogs became living communication interfaces. The battle wasn't won through destruction. It was won through collaboration. As the Confederation's fleet began to retreat, a single eagle soared above the Pacific Ocean. Not watching, not tracking, calculating, adapting, evolving. The final negotiation was nothing like anyone expected. The Great Hall of Diplomatic Resolution was not filled with military leaders or political figureheads. Instead, a diverse collection of humans, researchers, and their animal companions filled the space. A living, breathing representation of Earth's collaborative potential. Captain Rick Stolo, the Zarkon battle cruiser, stood at the center, his crystalline form reflecting the complex holographic displays that surrounded them. Beside him, Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in her quantum-adaptive wheelchair, her service dog Atlas positioned precisely at her side. A therapy llama named Serenity stood near the negotiation table. A research dolphin named Echo projected holographic data streams. A trained eagle perched on a specially designed platform, its eyes constantly scanning the room. "We do not offer submission," Elena began, her voice calm and precise. "We offer partnership." The Galactic Confederation's representative, a composite being of 3 different species, struggled to process the proposal. Humanity wasn't asking to join. They were proposing a fundamentally new model of galactic collaboration. Atlas began to interface with the diplomatic communication systems, not as a tool, not as an assistant, but as an active participant in the negotiation process. The holographic displays erupted with a cascade of data, not just scientific information, not just tactical assessments, but a living representation of Earth's adaptive potential. Agricultural systems managed by border collies, psychological research interfaces developed by therapy animals, communication networks that blurred the lines between biological and technological systems. "We're not a species to be conquered," Elena continued. "We're a collaborative ecosystem." The therapy llama, Serenity, took a calculated step forward. The room's psychological dynamics shifted imperceptibly. Tension reduced. Understanding increased. Echo the dolphin began projecting complex quantum communication models that made the Confederation's most advanced communication technologies look primitive. The research showed how Earth's species, human and animal, had developed a communication network that was simultaneously biological, technological, and adaptive. Captain Rick Stoll's crystalline form vibrated with the emotion that translated closest to professional awe. The final proposal was unprecedented. Humanity wasn't asking to join the Galactic Confederation. They were offering a new model of interspecies collaboration. A living network that could adapt, learn, and evolve in ways the galaxy had never seen. "Our strength," Elena said, "is not in individual capability. It's in our ability to collaborate." Atlas looked up. met the eyes of the alien observers. The service dog was more than a companion. He was a living communication interface, a computational node, a partner. The Galactic Confederation realized they were not looking at a potential client species. They were looking at a living, thinking, adaptive planetary system. And it was looking back, not with hostility, not with submission, but with an invitation to evolve together.